Hello there. Welcome to the artist talk for Rachel Lodge's Transfigurations, Carbon Flow at the Jack Straw New Media Gallery. Of course, none of us is physically at the Jack Straw New Media Gallery right now, but the installation is, and we hope you will go visit it. It's there Monday through Friday for you to check out. We do ask people to make an appointment, so you can call us, leave a message at 206-634-0919, or you might actually get a human to talk to, or you can email us, jsp@jackstraw.org, and make an appointment to come visit. It's definitely very much worth the visit if you feel comfortable leaving the house and coming to see the gallery, as you'll hear and see much more from Rachel very soon. If you're here in the Zoom room with us, welcome. If you're out there in Facebook land, hello. In either place, if you have any questions at any point here on Zoom, you can just type in the little chat window, type a question, and if we have time, we'll get to it later on. And if you're on Facebook, you can just type a comment with your questions, and Rachel will address as many as possible at the end, or maybe as they come up if you feel like it. We do receive funding from City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, King County Lodging Tax Fund, Washington State Arts Commission, Arts Fund, Rainier Institute and Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, and individual contributors, which we very much appreciate at all levels. And you can find more information about donating at jackstraw.org if you would like. It's been a pleasure having Rachel's installation. It'll be up in the gallery for over a month until April 23rd. So as hopefully the state and region and city slowly gets a little bit more open and people get a little bit more comfortable going out and about, you'll have more opportunities to come out and see it. And as more of you get vaccinated, which is a wonderful thing. So we do hope to be able to welcome you into the gallery, but it's great to have you here in this virtual space with us and with Rachel. And with that, I will hand it over to Rachel Lodge.
Well, hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Levi. Thank you for the opportunity to be with Jack Straw and to do this tonight. Let me get the screen sharing going. So thanks to Levi and Jack Straw, it's been really great to have the support, a chance to really do something in kind of a dedicated environment where I could create a sound environment as well as a visual environment. I've learned a lot more about working with audio than I had up until now, thanks to the folks at Jack Straw. And thanks to all of you for coming tonight. It's great to see folks and others that I may not know or that I can't see. Thank you for being here. So this exhibit or installation at Jack Straw, it's in their new media gallery, and it's called Transfigurations Carbon Flow. And the idea was to create an immersive kind of an installation on the carbon theme, which is something I've been working on for a while now. This was the first time I've had the chance to really have big moving imagery that would surround you on the two walls. The installation consists of a 15-minute animation, which some of you may have seen it online. One or two of you might have seen it in the space, plus some tangible kind of carbon-based objects. We'll show you a little bit of that as well. So tonight I'll talk a little bit about how I kind of got to this work, what some of my motivations were, and a little bit about how I actually make this stuff, and some of the things that I sort of have had to consider along the way. I'll start with the beginning of the animation and a few pictures of it in the space, kind of installation views. They're not super sharp because the room is dark, but it'll give you an idea sort of what it's like in the space. I will run some clips, but I won't run the whole thing. We'll just look at some clips in a minute. So the images you're seeing here, these are 10 to 12 feet wide, and of course, well over your head in those dimensions. Here's the beginning. We're kind of in this world of carbon atoms coming at you, spinning around and way bigger than your head. Here's the beginning of the animation. It kind of starts out with a flourish. It's silent for a minute, and then comes in with the audio, kind of looking at carbon in the universe. So we're kind of we've sort of gone from being in the night sky to kind of being on a piece of paper. That's sort of how it starts. Just a few more installation shots to give you an idea, and then we'll spend a little more time with some clips, just to give you a sense of what the progression is in the space. So how did I get to this carbon theme? I started thinking about climate change probably 25 years ago. I'm not a scientist at all, but a long time ago, almost majored in physical geography, which is all about the planet and Earth systems and all that stuff, which I thought was totally fascinating. I was a weather buff, and all the stuff about climate and how the planet works, I've always thought that all of that stuff was really cool. So because of that, I had kind of a basic undergraduate level understanding of why, if we put more greenhouse gas or carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and increase the energy level and the heat level, I had a fair understanding of why that was going to be a problem. But I wasn't really working on the issue at all. I was actually working on public sector stuff for kids and families mostly, and making art kind of on the side. But I was trying to follow the science as best I could, not being a scientist. I was getting more and more concerned, as we've all seen what's been happening. And I was also, because I had been spending some time kind of also working on communications, I was also keeping an eye on what was going on with the public, and kind of seeing how folks kind of just sort of weren't getting this. The scientists were doing their thing and folks kind of weren't getting it. There was a lot of obfuscation for sure, but it was also sort of hard to grasp what was happening, partly because the thing that causes the warming, the carbon dioxide, you can't see it, it's invisible. So I started thinking about, so how would you show that? How would you actually show CO2 emissions? What does CO2 look like? And not just CO2, but actually, I realized I kept hearing this about carbon emissions, carbon footprint, carbon pollution, decarbonization. So people were really leaning on this word carbon. And so then I was like, so what is this carbon stuff exactly? And I realized I was really fuzzy on some of the basics that underlie the climate system and the carbon cycle. I realized I more or less understood what happens after you burn the fossil fuels and the CO2 comes out, but what happens before combustion? So why is it that carbon dioxide comes out when you burn fossil fuels? And what are fossil fuels anyway? So I kind of got going on this education project, kind of a self-education thing. And I decided I needed to break this down all the way down to for myself, kind of getting it all the way down to atoms and molecules. I started spending a lot of time looking at kind of middle school science websites and the periodic table, trying to remember what I had learned in high school chemistry, pretty basic stuff, but I'd forgotten most of it. And sort of relearning about the properties of carbon, how it likes to bond with other elements. I started drawing carbon atoms. And of course, nobody's actually seen a carbon atom. So right away, if you're sort of the artist in the case, you have problems of representation. What does this thing look like, or how do you make a picture of it? If you could see one, it'd probably just be a blur, like that next to last one, which I call my AbX probability field, so abstract expressionist version, kind of just an energy field. But this is actually kind of where I started. It was just pictures of atoms. And then I got interested in the idea of carbon as stuff. if we're thinking about carbon and climate change, mostly we're thinking about it in the air or as fossil fuels. But does carbon exist as a pure element like iron or lead? I was asking myself, and of course it does. Pure carbon in mineral form is graphite and also diamond, and coal, of course, and plankton, leaves, anything that's ever been alive. Basically, it's all over the place. These jars were from when I was putting together a series of 12 jars of kind of carbon-based objects. This picture was in my studio while I was still working on it. Carbon-based stuff includes leaves, dirt, food, us. We're about 18% carbon in the human body. And these jars are in the space at the gallery at Jack Straw right now, in a little exhibit against one wall. Having put this together, I've sort of found out that going through the jars in sequence is actually a pretty good teaching tool for learning about the carbon cycle. But anyway, by the time I had put this together, which was 2 or 3 years ago, I was really pretty hooked on the science and just fascinated with all of it. And in a larger context of climate change, I really found that this carbon lens opened up a really big imaginative space, sort of a more spacious way of being present with the climate issue, where you could really explore these amazing processes all over the planet that are invisible to ordinary human perception, some of them literally invisible, like carbon dioxide, but other phenomena that are maybe too big or too small or too far away in space or in time to see, or they're at different scales from one another. So that's one thing is really tiny, it's in a really important relationship to something else that's much larger, but if you're sort of at one scale, you can't really perceive the other one. So I was just really interested in how do you think about all that and start to bring these things into a relationship. The past couple of years, I've done several animations related to all of this. This is the fourth one, actually, I guess, in this exhibit. But for this exhibit, I was really interested in kind of starting from the materiality of carbon and art making, with a simple thing like a pencil that you're doing drawings with. Graphite, of course, is what we call it pencil lead is actually graphite, which is in a pencil. It's almost pure carbon. It's mixed with some binder to hold it together. But the graphite essentially is pure carbon. And the wood in a pencil is about 50% carbon. Where's my pencil? The wood is about 50% carbon that came from the air through photosynthesis. So I was fascinated with this idea that the carbon that's in the graphite is the same carbon that's in the air. It's the same carbon that's in diamonds, the same carbon that's in trees. It's the same carbon that's in you. So here in this drawing, you can see I was just sort of capturing a few things. So pencils, there's a carbon atom. There's the structure of graphite, which is a very specific structure, the relationship between the atoms. And I had, in thinking about all that, I had been wanting to do something with drawing as a kind of this carbon on carbon idea. I'd been wanting to do something with that for a while, knowing that when you make a mark with the pencil on paper, you're basically laying off, like you can see here, you can see those sort of hexagonal shapes. You're basically laying off sheets of carbon atoms on the paper. And the paper, of course, has also got a good bit of carbon in it. So it's sort of like carbon drawing on carbon. And there's a person behind this, which is me, kind of driving the pencil. But I like the idea that in a way it's sort of carbon telling a story about itself. So I'll play this clip. Let's see here, there we go. anybody had told me that I was going to spend this much time trying to explain kind of basic biochemistry to myself, I wouldn't have believed it. I totally got the photosynthesis formula by heart now. And of course, what all of that was, I was trying to sort of convey some of that without getting totally bogged down in it. Of course, the idea is that carbon dioxide from the air is combining with water that comes up from the roots in a plant. The plant is using that to make glucose, which is the first product of photosynthesis, and then stringing those little glucose molecules together to make cellulose and related stuff, which is basically how plants and trees make themselves. And this is going on everywhere and all the time that the sun shines. And so carbon is sort of building itself as the structure of all of this vegetal material. And so in the animation, from that point, we sort of leave the page and go off out into nature. And I was really interested in these sort of moving patterns and textures and trying to work with the idea that via photosynthesis and respiration, something invisible and intangible in the air, this immaterial thing is manifesting all the time and becoming solid from sort of nothing into something through photosynthesis, and building up all this structure and form. There's the Buddhists talk about emptiness becoming form, or actually emptiness is form, which is a more difficult idea. But anyway, emptiness becoming form and then back again, sort of over and over, materializing and dematerializing. And all of this from this tiny fraction of the air, because carbon dioxide in the air is actually less than 1% of the atmosphere. But it's that fraction of the air combined with water that is generating all this incredible diversity and variety of forms in this really intricate and patterned way. Biological and botanical form, the whole rainforest, any environment you want to talk about, that's happening. And in this piece, so I was thinking about that a lot in this piece. I felt like I could just barely suggest it with what I was able to do in this animation. But and all of this that's happening is not something that's separate from us that we just look at. It actually kind of is us. Carbon is flowing through you. It is you. You're getting the oxygen from the plants when you breathe, and you're getting the carbon from them when you eat. So here's a little bit kind of trying to express that notion a little bit. So in that way, we're all part of this larger pattern or flow. And for me, there's that's sort of the epiphany in this material. And I think part of my wanting to work with it is that I'm looking for a way to sort of articulate that awareness and stabilize it through the work. And I'll also say that for me, this piece is partly about the idea of refuge in a time of instability and loss. Even before the pandemic, we've been dealing with this sort of increasing climate loss and other kinds of loss. And there are also a lot of questions out there right now we've all been dealing with this past year, especially about what or whom to trust. For me, if I'm kind of looking for kind of the base ground of all this that I can actually kind of stand on or sit on, the atoms and molecules are pretty fundamental. And the way that this flows to me is, it's transient in a way, but there's another way in which it's solid and you can trust it. To me, that's how it feels. And there's reality to it, even though you can't literally see all of it. And of course, as a process, or these are a life process, it's also fragile, but it's here for as long as life continues. And also just generally for me, exploring this material, it's just like the earth is just this incredible place, and that's kind of inexhaustible, which is kind of wonderful. Then of course we have what we humans have been getting up to the last couple of 100 years, which we started doing without any real idea of what was going to happen. Digging up and burning all that ancient plant matter from 200 or 300 million years ago, and burning it being combustion basically, which is running it's like running photosynthesis in reverse. So the CO2 that came in before is going to come back out again. There goes all the carbon dioxide from millions of years ago back up into the air, into the atmosphere, with consequences that we all now know about. So as a narrative, we don't exactly know where all this ends. It's up to us. But at the end of this piece for the installation, I didn't sort of want to make a prediction about that. I wanted to come back to just the pattern or just the flow, and kind of let that be. there's a heartbeat there at the end of the audio. I don't know if you can hear it. It's not very loud. So now I thought I would just talk a little bit about the process of how I actually made the animation, show you some of what went into it, both the visuals and the audio. So a friend and I had been, during the pandemic, we'd been doing some drawings together, or separately, but then sharing them over Zoom, just to kind of try to get ourselves focused during the pandemic. I don't know about the rest of you folks, but it's definitely not been the easiest time to concentrate this past year, concentrate on anything. Probably a lot of you have found the same thing. So my friend Nita Bratloch, who's a wonderful artist. So we were doing these drawings, and I was not doing them with any intention that I was going to show them or even use them for anything, but it was just a kind of practice and try to stay focused. Drawings were sort of a way to survive kind of during this period of time. And I found myself kind of doing a little series of groves of trees that were kind of made up. And this is one of the first ones that I did. There's another one. And some of these are a little bit autobiographical. This is one that refers to, it could be anywhere, but in my mind, it refers to a place in Yosemite where I've been many times. This is the giant sea, sorry about that. There we go. This is the giant sea bass. It shows up in the animation briefly in the ocean part, which we haven't looked at, but it's there. This fish I just learned about this year, and I could actually go on and on about the giant sea bass, but I won't. It lives near where I grew up in Southern California, just offshore, and I spent a lot of time on the water, so I could sort of relate, but I never knew about it growing up. This is a huge fish that gets to be like 7 feet long and weigh 500 pounds. It lives in the kelp forest. So this was a fun discovery, and I decided to throw it into the mix. But also during this past year, as I was doing these drawings, other kinds of imagery came up. I feel like the pandemic kind of showed up, politics showed up, and just generally some of the distress of this past year also got into the series in a way. And again, I wasn't doing these drawings with this exhibit in mind, but these did end up, a number of the drawings did end up sort of flowing into it. And these are, as imagery, it's a little different style from what I'd been doing for the previous animations that I'd done. Those were mostly watercolor and ink. And I wasn't sure I wanted this whole thing to be in black and white as drawing on paper. But as I was saying earlier, I did really like this sort of notion of carbon on carbon, so pencil on paper. I liked the idea of what I might be able to do with that, but I didn't necessarily want the whole thing to be in black and white. So then what to do? Well, it turns out you can do a lot in Photoshop. On left and right here are actually the last two drawings that you saw. On the left side is the drawing of the figures, but reversed, so black to white, and layered over another drawing. On the right is that sort of dark little drawing with the little buildings in the corner, and just kind of cropped and then kind of heavily photoshopped with color and pumped way up. And I sort of found that in Photoshop, if you push things hard enough, it's sort of like it sort of has the same effect of adding distortion to sounds and audio. But I actually kind of really liked what that did. So next piece I do, I'm probably gonna do more of that. Here's the same drawing of the figures on the left, but layered over a different drawing and with different color manipulations going on, and also some of the little spinning carbon shapes on top of it at that point in the animation. The drawing of fire on the right was also just a plain graphite drawing, but I pushed the color in that direction. So it gives you an idea of kind of how I was getting all of that out of just the pencil drawings. Then for the animation, of course, you have to sequence all of that imagery in time. And the way that I did that was using this software, which is part of Adobe Creative Suite that some of you probably know it really well. This is After Effects, which is motion graphics software. And so you can see here a little bit of the timeline for just one part, and all of those bars going across are showing all the different elements in the image and when they appear in the image and when they disappear. And I'm also controlling where they move to and at what speed. So this is the software that lets you do that. Then I don't know how many clips that I made in the After Effects software, then all of those have to get edited together to make the final video. So this is Adobe Premiere, which is video editing software. And all the clips get assembled together in that timeline at the bottom. The upper row is the left side screen and the lower row is the right side screen, because I was doing this 2-channel thing. I had to learn how to do that. And then here's this software for doing the audio. It's possible to do the audio directly in Premiere, but I did want to be more detailed about it. And so with help from Jack Straw, which I really appreciated. They do a lot of stuff with Pro Tools. I think that's mainly what they use, but because I was already in Adobe, it seemed to make sense to use this Audition software. And so I had a big learning curve with this to figure out how to use this in some detail and how to do the mix. That big learning curve. As far as where I got the sound elements, I was fortunate to be able to do some studio recording at Jack Straw with their sound engineer, Aisha. Thank you, Aisha, for that. I recorded a whole bunch of different stuff, but I wasn't sure what I was going to use. I did record some guitar and some kalimba that made it into this piece. Like at the beginning, what you're hearing is a guitar, and then the sort of tropical forest, and the kalimba shows up several times. I also had access to Jack Straw's sound effects library, which is extensive, and they've got a lot of different sort of nature ambience and sort of sound effects, including some kind of silly, goofy things that for like comical sorts of sounds, but also a lot of industrial sounds and all kinds of stuff in there. So I kind of combed through what they had and pulled out certain things that I thought I was going to want to use. Especially with the stuff that I recorded myself, the guitar and the kalimba, I applied a lot of effects in Audition. It allows you to do all kinds of things to the sound. I used a lot of delay and echo. And what I was after was to try to get some kind of sonic equivalent of the sense of cycling or spinning, which you see a lot of in the animation. The sense of something going out and returning in a rhythmic way. It's what, at least in my representation of the atoms, it's what the atoms are doing. The atoms are spinning. It's what nature does on kind of a grand scale. And there's all this sort of rhythm and repetition embedded in all of that. So I was sort of looking for, to some extent, for kind of a sonic analog to the visual repetition and patterning that's in the nature imagery. And with the insects and the ocean waves, of course, that I got those from Jack Straw, those are inherently rhythmic, the ocean waves to make a rhythmic sound. And I was using those sounds also to create more ambience, to convey sort of spatially the presence of things that I couldn't show visually. So like I wasn't making, there are no pictures of insects, but you can hear them. With the crowds, you can't see the crowds, but you can hear them. They're kids, it's a schoolyard recording, I think. You can hear the kids, you can hear the jets, you don't see them. I had to kind of create a sound for the pump jacks. Those are the oil well pumps that you see. That's actually windshield wipers from Jack Straw, plus 2 different kinds of industrial ambience sounds. And I had to kind of pitch shift the windshield wipers down to try to make them sound like more serious. And in my mind, they're actually still not menacing enough, but that's how I put that sound together. And then but the overall time element is also really interesting to me, kind of how time works in nature and how it works for us perceptually, because we're in this sort of flow of time where everything has a duration. And so one of the things that I was having to decide kind of all the way through is, how long do things last? How long does something stay on the screen? How long does the sound last? And kind of what's the tempo of the piece? When you talk about animation, a lot of times the expectation is it's going to be entertaining and it's going to be kind of frenetic, but actually my instinct is usually to slow things down, slow it down. Of course, if things are too slow, it's boring. But for me, if it's too fast, it doesn't feel right. And there's also sort of what's a tempo that allows adequate time for absorption. And I don't want too much going on at once. I'm hoping to sort of focus attention rather than split it. So I realized just actually in the last day or so, I'm thinking about this, that I think I'm sort of trying to have things happening at kind of a walking pace, or maybe kind of a breathing pace, and which I think in music is sometimes called andante. So maybe that's kind of the tempo of this piece. It's sort of an andante piece. And then finally, I just wanted to say something, and then I'd love to hear your comments or questions. I wanted to say something about working from science and trying to be science-based with this kind of stuff, especially in our current environment. I'm very aware, of course, and have been from the beginning, climate change is a hot topic. The facts of climate have been contested. It's maybe a bit less so now. But it's been important to me all through all of the climate-related stuff that I've done, that I wanted to try to keep basic faith with the science, and to try to avoid creating confusion or distortions or misperceptions, at the same time as I sort of have to radically simplify things. But also at the same time wanting to be true to my own sort of aesthetic impulses. I end up having to make some kind of interpretation that balances those things as best I can. I've been fortunate to spend some time with scientists and work with some scientists who are actually experts on aspects of climate change, as well as a lot of science educators. And I ask them to check me on what I'm doing. They're usually very generous about it. I'll just close with the thought that I noticed when I'm hearing scientists talk about a research project, let's say if they're introducing what they're working on, they'll often say, we are trying to understand X, whatever it is. We're trying to understand how something works or how something goes. And I really like that phrase. I feel like to understand something it's a bigger word than to know. And I kind of feel right now like we're all just sort of trying to understand. That's sort of what we're doing. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. And I'd love to have your comments or questions.
Thank you, Rachel. That was great. Wonderful to hear from you. I'm giving people time to ask questions, and I don't know if you want to open it up to people to just unmute themselves and ask.
Oh yeah,
if folks are more comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, I would like to start just by really tipping my hat to you as far as the audio side. It seems like you really just went for it. And really clearly learned a lot and tried a lot and experimented a lot, and it's really cool all the stuff you were able to do at home that maybe in another time you would have been spending hours in the studio at Jack Straw.
Yeah, and thank you, Livia. Thanks so much for that. I appreciate that. I had, I'm. It's a little regret that I didn't get to do that. It would have been really fun. That was a consequence of the pandemic, not being able to spend more time physically and in person. Yeah. In the studio. I would have loved that, but it's actually amazing how much support and help I was able to get from you guys regardless. So
all good.
Through Zoom and what have you, I really appreciated that.
Anybody in our audience here on Zoom have any questions they want to throw in?
Or comments, just
comments, sure.
Yeah.
I see that. Comment, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think I might have been talking over somebody else who might have wanted to say something too.
Oh, it's okay, Jessica. Why don't you go ahead? We'll get to that.
What struck me this time, and I have looked at the entire piece and really appreciate and admire what you're doing. What struck me this time, and I don't remember why not before, was the image of the hands at the end. It really spoke to, I think, and whether this is your intent or not, to putting it into literally the human dimension, that it is in our hands, that, and of course it was your hands that created this as well. I mean, hands are an important element in terms of the creation of the piece itself, but it really brought to mind for me how you're bringing us, the audience, into this process of where do we take this? And I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. Yeah, I thought about that a little bit, and actually, I was thinking about it in just the two senses that you were describing. Um, I don't know. I also thought a lot, and I wasn't able to do as much with this as I would have liked. I don't know if you could perceive that the hand, there's actually a little stream of carbon atoms coming up this way, kind of through, like it's through arterial through the here, and they kind of end up going off into space. And so I was wanting to do something to capture the idea that you have carbon streaming, let's say through a leaf, and it's a vein pattern. And you have basically the same, they're network patterns that occur all over in nature, that occur in leaves or in roots or in the pattern of veins and arteries in the human body. And I was wanting to do more with that. That was my little tiny gesture at trying to capture, just barely hint at that idea. I'd love to do more with that sometime. Pat, I think you had a comment or a question.
So it's a comment question. So I noticed your form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And so I was curious because the science basis of this, the drawings are gorgeous, and having them carry that very interesting aspect of science through them is wonderful. But I wondered if there was any stories or comments you'd have of where I found the science all of a sudden bumped up against the Buddhist teachings of emptiness. And that was a real shocker for me when it happened. And when I heard form is emptiness, emptiness is form, I thought, oh boy, you've bumped heads with it coming. It's almost like understanding the physics when all of a sudden there's a whole nother way of understanding how the world works. So I would love to hear if you ran into some of the concepts in Buddhism that kind of maybe imbued some of the visuals, or how you chose to do things, or.
Yeah, there's no question the work is informed by my reading or my understanding of some of that, as modest as my understanding of all that is. I think it's interesting. I feel like in doing this work, I am sort of trying to understand that better. That's kind of what I'm doing. When I was speaking about trying to stabilize kind of a perception about certainly the way the earth works, that's kind of what I was getting at. I don't feel, I'd probably want to stop short of saying that it's a Buddhist piece, but it is certainly readable that way, and that's very much in my own mind. I think, I suppose there's an aspect to the piece that's pretty cosmic. I'll admit that. But I suppose if you really, and people are, I think, realizing this, if you really delve into physics, let's say, about which I know almost nothing, but my understanding is, if you're pushing into physics, if you're pushing into even some of this biochemistry stuff, and certainly some of the perceptions kind of at the outer edges of Buddhism and so on, those things start to converge. So.
Rachel.
Yes.
It's Kathy down in Santa Barbara.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. I wondered, you said there were some youth and family workshops based on this exhibit. And I was wondering about the reaction of youth and what you meant by youth, whether they were young kids or what age we're looking at them, and whether you felt you succeeded in your goal, which was to communicate climate change in a way that would help people to get it. Do you feel that the audiences who come in do get it? Or have you watched them? Have you been there in person and seen how a little kid or an adult or a grandparent reacts to what you have so amazingly created?
Thank you, Kathy. So I'll try to answer that. First of all, the Jack Straw Youth and Family Workshop actually hasn't happened yet.
Oh.
And I actually, Levi and I need to chat about that. That remains to be put together. But then to answer your question about how people respond in the gallery space to this work, because of COVID, unfortunately, I have not been there in person very much at all. And I think actually visitation has been pretty light. That's my sense. I'm hoping that that'll, as Levi was saying at the beginning, I'm hoping that'll pick up. What I can speak to is that I have spent now, I've had a number of occasions where I'm on Zoom with kids. I've done that now 7 or 8 times. And I've also had some time with kids in person and with youth in person, let's say at Pacific Science Center, places like that. So I have interacted with kids on this material, not on this latest thing, but on the work that preceded it and on the jars, especially. I've taken the jars around to different places. And yeah, I find actually it does, kids do get it. They grab hold of it. And what I've tried to do when I interact with kids also is to give them an idea, to give them an opportunity to do some of their own storytelling. So make their own little storyboard, sort of talk some about some basic science, have them look at the jars and, without the labels and say, can you figure out what's in here? Most of the jars, it's pretty obvious, but some of them it's not. And then figure out, okay, this stuff was in this jar, but then some of it got into the other jar. How do you think that happened? So that kind of thing. So yeah, I have found that generally this body of work that I've been working on kids do connect with it. And I'm hoping to do more with that.
Thank you.
Rachel, it's Melinda,
Yeah.
also in Santa Barbara. So I along those lines, it's just so beautiful. I don't want it to go away after the museum closes and the show is gone. And I wondered if you had thought about taking stills and making a children's book from it, because I just have this memory of children's books that were so beautifully illustrated with not very many words, but got through, a simple message. And I just think that The Boy in the Woods, is just such a beautiful image. What we're looking at right here is so beautiful. And I wondered if you'd given that any thought.
I actually, yeah, thank you. Actually, I have given that a lot of thought, and I have a number of people have suggested that to me. I have actually too many different versions of such a book in sort of half or 2/3 cooked right now. But yeah, that's definitely on my list. I'm hoping to do that. I haven't thought so much about how the imagery from this current thing would work in that way, but I have a lot of related stuff, and I have some of it more kind of in kids speak. It's simpler. It's not as lush as this. It's more flat. I have a version that's like that. I have a version that is sort of based on. Well, anyway, I have I have 2 or 3 different versions right now.
That's good.
Thank you for the encouragement. I appreciate it. I'll just note about that, though, it's interesting. I've learned on this, the very first thing that I did in this, kind of on this theme, the very first thing I did was sort of a super simple animation. It was actually for Climate Solutions here in Seattle. That was a nonprofit. It was for them. And I have 2 other animations besides this one and a series of prints, 21 prints. And each time I would sort of think that I could just transpose the content from one medium to another and that it would be simple and easy, and it is not. So going from animation to prints is not easy or simple. Going from the prints back to animation is not, and then going from either of those to a book turns out to be more challenging than I would have expected. But I'm intending to try to do it. So
Great.
Rachel, it's June in Santa Barbara.
yes, hi.
Hi. I just have to tell you, along with how interesting all of this is and all of your animation, your artwork is phenomenal.
Thank you.
It always is. And it's just, you go from one thing to the next and you think, wow, Rachel did all this. And of course you did. Thank you. This has been great.
Thank you, June. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Hi.
Yes. Hi.
I'm Colleenne. This is my first time seeing any of this, so it's pretty cool. And it made me think of a lot of things, like kind of thinking about the beginning of the presentation, and you were talking about like having just like your interest in climate change in the beginning, and how like you kind of had a general understanding, and you were kind of mainly mentioned like the kind of greenhouse gas effect. And that really like reminded me of, that was one of the concepts that I learned when I was a kid that really like blew my mind. I read like An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore when I was like 10 or something, and I was like,
Wow.
whoa, this is crazy. Like,
That's young, yes.
yeah, so it's like that kind of like concept is, I've like thought about it a lot. So it's like, it was really cool to like see your whole journey like into making this piece, and just like seeing, I haven't seen it, but seeing your presentation of how it all flows together in the form of a presentation. And it also, I also really liked how you mentioned kind of like carbon as kind of like a vehicle for grief. Like you kind of mentioned that your drawings kind of embodied just a lot of stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting because it's like kind of, to me, like related to the idea of like how carbon is like related. It's like it's kind of like inextricable from like the cycle. So it's like inherently this moving thing, like everything is, in like some opinions, but it's like this thing where it's like, it's really hard to understand unless you're like unless you're willing to like travel through different spaces and times to like see it in different ways. Because that's kind of like life in some ways, like carbon, like when people die, like just like you can get burned or you can get buried, and it's just like a different way of dealing with your carbon. And like that related to grief is just like a really kind of like interesting way to like kind of like tie in together a lot of like grief that like happens in life, with like the kind of scientific aspect. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And a little thing also I thought of, because I just started this job where I use a pen a lot.
Yeah.
And then I started using a pencil though, like 2 days ago. And it's like this pen, and I was like, whoa, this feels way better. And I was like, just like thinking about how much I love writing in pen and then pencil. And then it was kind of cool to hear you explain like, oh yeah, it's just like carbon.
Yeah.
It's like
Oh, very cool.
something that I kind of wasn't thinking about. But then, okay, so those are kind of my reflections, but I kind of had a question for you because in your presentation, you kind of like mentioned kind of like the, I guess like things like, you know, like wood and like the human form, and also like the elements in the air and ether kind of like being transmuted into carbon. But I'm wondering what your opinion is, or like what you think of like kind of like, I don't know, like this is hard to describe, but kind of like how you think technology plays a role in that. Because like the way how you can, like you said, like humans are like 18% carbon, and then like a leaf is like a percent of carbon. Like I'm thinking like, I feel like right now in the world, it's like people are still separating like technology, like machines, like a computer or something that I'm like talking to you on. Like people kind of still separate, just like how people are still understanding climate change and just so many things. It's like, but in specifically like technology, like,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering like how do you think that like connects with like how carbon was able to become like a piece of technology, you know, like versus like, even though like, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of makes sense.
I think if I generally understand kind of what you're thinking about or what you're wondering about, I think I hear you talking a little bit about this sort of a tendency to feel separate from, well, humans have a tendency to feel separate, I think, from everything in a way, sort of separate from experience, separate from each other, separate from technology, maybe separate from nature, certainly. I know that I've thought a lot about our relationship to nature and how we have badly misread that, at least in not all people all over the world, but a lot of us, which is part of why we're in the situation that we're in now. And some of that is around technology and the way that we use technology. And certainly technology has been the medium by which we have thrown a whole bunch of carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere. I think sort of a general attitude toward technology, that would be probably a bigger question than I could sort of manage right now. But certainly you can certainly tell a story about climate change as a story about technology. And I think actually that a lot of people do that. And it's part of the reason I was interested in actually sort of diverging from that a little bit and telling the story more as a story about biology, actually, rather than technology. Because people talk a lot about, people talk about climate change as a problem with physics. They talk about it as a problem with engineering and with the economy and money and power plants and all this. And it very much is all of that. And it's very much about cutting emissions yesterday and stopping all that as soon as we can. So all of that is absolutely correct and true. I was more interested in exploring this sort of other pathway for thinking about it. But the technology, it's a really huge subject.
Yeah.
So thank you for your thoughts. I appreciate it.
Thank you too. Yeah, I think that was a cool answer, because like I think that is kind of like, I think that's another reason why this piece is so cool, is because it really taps into like kind of like Pat was saying, like tapping into this kind of like core element where it's like, I think it's really like, it's so interpretive, I guess. And yeah, I don't know. That's it.
Thank you so much. Levi, how are we doing for time?
Well, it's about 8. I mean, I think if anybody has maybe one last question, we could do one more question. But otherwise, I think I felt pretty good. Any of you who are in Seattle, Kalyan, you should definitely come. Let me know if you want to come visit the gallery. We'll make an appointment. But yeah, give us a call, 206-634-0919. Leave a message or email jsp@jackstraw.org if you want to visit. And again, through April 23rd, there will be a youth and family workshop, Saturday, April 24th. We have lots of time to figure out what that means. But it will be cool, I promise. As you can already see, Rachel has lots of great ideas and processes. And the general approach is, in the before times we would do these in person, and we will do that again. But for now, this is a Zoom-based workshop. But the idea is, just looking at the themes and some version of the artistic techniques employed in any given installation, and doing a little art making workshop around them, and they're pretty cool. Even the Zoom version. So I have no doubt we'll do something cool.
And Levi, just another thought for Melinda. She was asking about, can this kind of be preserved in some way? Is it correct that when this is being taped right now, it's on Facebook Live, which means that it will be archived on Facebook, right?
It will, and we'll put it up probably a slightly cleaned up version on YouTube, and the opening reception is up on YouTube as well, and that has the full animation. If you haven't seen that, if you're in, say, Santa Barbara and can't get to Seattle, you can see the full animation probably on Facebook and on YouTube on our pages there.
And you can also see it on my website, which is Rachel middle initial D lodge.com.
Yeah.
It's on my homepage right now, and that'll probably stay there for some period of time for sure.
I hope so.
There as well.
And we'll be doing, in the coming weeks and months, we'll be releasing an interview podcast with Rachel, which has yet to be recorded, which should also be enlightening. So, yeah, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being here. And tell your friends to come on back and find the archive version in the future.
So thanks, Levi, and thanks, everyone, so much for coming.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.